The birth of Smoky Mountain Branch 419. Presented by James Collins. Smoky Mountain Branch 419 was charted on June 5, 1893, under the fourth president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, Frank E. Smith. Branch 419's very first charter, however, was materialized by John N. Parsons. President Parsons was the seventh president of the National Association of Letter Carriers. Smoky Mountain Branch 419 represents constituents in 21 offices across East Tennessee. In the Knoxville installation, you have a total of 11 offices. Burlington Station, Cedar Bluff Station, Concord Station, Downtown Station, Fountain City Station, North Station, Northwest Carrier Annex, which consists of Lonsdale Station, Norwood Station, and West Hills Station, South Station, and West Station. The associate offices consist of 11 offices. Alcoa, Maryville. These two offices merged together in 2011 under the duo process. Maryville, formerly known as Branch 1761 Maryville, Tennessee, merged with Branch 419 on February 28, 2001. Gatlinburg office, Harriman office, Jellicoe office, Jefferson City office, Kingston office, Lenoir City office, Newport office, Oak Ridge office, formerly known as Branch 3869 Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge merged with Branch 419 between 2001 through 2002 after Branch 1761 Maryville had merged with Branch 419. Interesting fact about Branch 419, records show branch dues were $1.50 in the 1950s. Unlike today, the branch also had members that acted as collectors in each station for collecting the dues. I would now like to introduce Brother Ralph G. Davis. He began his postal career in 1965 with the United States Postal Service.
Ralph G. Davis, and I was a steward, a scribe, an alternate steward, secretary, EI facilitator, HBR representative. I had several offices with the 419.
Did Branch 419 strike in 1970 with our fellow brothers and sisters across the country?
No, it was almost unanimous. It was five. We had about 100 people, or over 100 probably, at the meeting. We had a meeting, called meeting, to vote on the strike, whether to strike or not. We had over 100 members there, and there was 5 or 6 voted to strike, and the rest of them voted not to strike.
Was it heated?
Yes. Lambden saw to that.
Who was Lambden?
Well, Lambden was just, he might have been a steward down West Knoxville, branch, or post office, but he did the speaking for the strike, you know. We were way back to back, me and him and Irby Foster, and he spoke for the strike because our brothers were out there putting their job on the line, you know. He wanted to support them.
How was it before the contract?
You know, we started getting raises every year. Before that, we had to go to Congress and beg for a raise, and they might give us one, and they might not. And if they gave us one, it might be, I mean, every year we didn't get one, you know, but if they gave us one, it would be like 1% or 1.5% or something, you know, it'd be.
Do you recall who the branch president was?
It was P.V. Majors. We called him Mule. Everybody called him Mule Majors. He was a disabled veteran, just had one leg. And he was a good president because he would go to bat for the carriers and beg for them, you know, which is all we could do because we had no contract or no right to strike or anything.
Did achieving a contract change anything?
Yes, that meant everything. Our pay went up, and probably sometime in the mid to late 70s, we started getting a decent living. You know, you could have a decent living at the post office. But before that, we had carriers in some of these big towns like New York that were getting food stamps. Had to have assistance, you know. That's how little they were making, how much salary they were making. So, oh yeah, and not just that, but the working conditions improved because we had something to go by, you know, something to, and of course we had local agreements, you know, too, where we could go by. That's what made really David Lambden, when he became president, that's what made him an effective president. Is back then management didn't take things seriously, and they didn't know much about the contract or anything. They didn't care about it, you know. But I recall one time, I won't call any names, but one supervisor, I was a steward and I was filing a grievance, and I took our local agreement and I showed him to him, you know. I said, here, you see, you can't, this is how it is. He said, what is that? And I said, that's our local agreement. He said, well, can I have that? I said, I've never seen that. So management didn't provide them with stuff, with tools, you know. But anyway, that was, yeah, it meant everything, the contract did. And
Did you assist on the Knoxville LMOU?
yeah. We had a good one too. I mean, you know, we had some that every year they wanted to get some of the stuff out of it, because it was on the vacations and stuff, or the annual leave. But yeah, I was in on about everything like that.
Did the branch face any legal issues?
Yes, we did. We had the secretary before me. Well, Gibb Johnson was one before me, but before him, our secretary was Lester Smith, and we didn't have an office then. The union didn't have an office, and he kept all the records and everything at his house. And when he died, they wouldn't let us have the records. Well, it was his sisters really, but they wouldn't let us have the records. And we didn't know where he had filed. Because every year that was part of the secretary's duty, is to file to the IRS and the Labor Department the forms, you know, that you've got to file. And we didn't have no way of knowing whether he'd filed them or not. And so we kept waiting. And then we received notice that they hadn't been filed, and they were penalty like I think it was like $100 a day or something. We had thousands of dollars that we owed them, according to them, you know. And we got that. We talked to the IRS and worked with them, you know, and got that. Because of our circumstances, they did away with that, and we just went ahead and did the regular, what we should have done in the first place and thought he had done, you know.
Where did the branch host meetings?
Carpenter's Hall up downtown there, and we rented that.
What was your best memory with Branch 419?
Ben Johnson retired as a business agent in Region 8. And his RA was Andy Barnett. And for some reason, I think it was because Andy Barnett had offered if Lambden would help him get votes, you know, that he would give him a RA job. And but for some reason he decided, even though there was a better candidate, Lou Dress, But he decided, Lambda did, he went all in on Andy Barnett. And that's all he did was call and talk to him. And he worried more about getting Andy Barnett elected business agent for a year or two there. A year anyway that he's running. Then he did taking care of his business as president, you know. And that's just that's stuff like that's what done him in, you know. And like I say, that's why I say we were getting in bad shape. Lou, I knew Lou. He came here. I had a big hand in getting him elected because he came here and me and Lambden had a falling out about this. Lambden had talked Lou into running, and then he decided to jump on Andy Barnett because Barnett had offered him something, I'm sure, but that's just my speculation. But so Lou called me and he said, when I come, I'm going to come up there. And he said, will you go around with me to these stations? And I said, I sure will. And so I went around with him to all the stations, you know, and we stayed out in the parking lot and introduced ourselves. I introduced him to everybody. And then he was going to send out a letter to everybody. He wanted me to write a letter. And so I wrote a letter for him. But so I'm secretary at the time. Lambden's president. So I wrote a letter for him, you know. And me and Lambden, we were opposite sides here. But anyway, I knew Lou. Lou told me, he said, if I get beat, I'll just go back to my job carrying mail and being president of Huntsville, in Huntsville, Alabama. He said, it's no big deal, you know. But he said, I want to be elected, but if I don't get it, I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. Well, Andy, he didn't get elected. He hadn't worked but 6 months as a carrier. And then he got to be RA, you know, and didn't carry no more. So when he went back to carrying, he was a sub because he'd never had a route or anything. He just started. And he worked about 6 months and quit the post office. His wife was a supervisor or something down there in Nashville. But anyway, he quit the post office and went to something else, went to some other job. But anyway, he didn't want to be a carrier. See, Lou told me, just like I always felt, there's nothing wrong being a carrier, a letter carrier, you know. It's an honorable profession, you know. And when Lou told me that, I thought, man, you're my man, you know. So anyway, I wrote a letter, you know, to all the members, and they all knew me, you know, because I'd been a union official all them years. And I'd worked at all the stations too, by the way, which made me know everybody just about. And so anyway, we mailed them. And Lambden was a member, so he got one. And I used to every day, he'd want to go to lunch. Me and him go to lunch together. He was working over at the office, you know. So this one day, me and him and Irby was over there. And let's go to lunch, he said. He wouldn't let us get no work done because we get there and he wanted to go to lunch. So wait a minute, I got work to do, you know. But anyway. And so he said, well, I'm going to buy a house and see if I got any mail. And so he went by the house and he got his mail and he had that letter that I wrote, you know. He opened it up and he read it, you know, and he said, well, if you think you can make a difference, you're just, boy, he got mad. And, but the whole thing, that what happened is Lou won Knoxville by 100 and something votes. He got the vast majority of votes, you know, out of Knoxville. and he won, it was a close election, so I quit being this. This Lambden calls this because he wanted to be like President Trump. I can fire you or I can do whatever I want. Well, he couldn't, you know. If you get elected, you're elected, whether he's president or not. But anyway, he said, well, if you're not going to support Andy, he said, I'm not going to support you for state secretary. And he got somebody to run against me, you know, or he was going to, and I said, well, you don't have to do that. I said, I just won't run. That's fine. And I said, I also resign from or after my term's over, I won't run for secretary again. And that's when he he got elected. John Burnett got elected secretary. And I'm pretty sure he was secretary when, of course he may not have been, because we had Kevin Mee came in there too. That might have been a couple of years. With the 2-year terms, John Burnett was secretary for a couple of years, and then Kevin Mee ran and was the secretary, and I think he was secretary when Tom come in. And they had some problems with that because he didn't do the filing, Kevin didn't, that he should have, the same thing that we did. And I think through Tony's hard work, Tony Rodriguez, he got that straightened out, you know, because Kevin, he quit the post office even, and Tony became secretary, and I think he got that straightened out where we didn't have to pay anything because they didn't get filed. See, you had to file every year. You had to file with the Labor Department and with the IRS. And but anyway, that's another thing that happened there. But after Tony took over, of course, Tony did a good job too. You know, him and Tom did a real good job, both of them. But you got to keep up with that. And we had a treasurer at the time when I was secretary that didn't do anything. He didn't want to do anything. And everybody liked him, so he always got elected. But I told him, I said, you know, you're the treasurer. It's not secretary-treasurer. I said, you're the one supposed, it says the treasurer will do these forms, you know, financial statements, you know, we have to send in. He said, I ain't done nothing. I said, well, I guess I'll keep doing them, because it started way back with Lester Smith in the 60s or whatever. He'd always done it himself, you know. And they just kept it up all the way through.
Time for a change.
I was always put on Route 1298 because that guy had a lot of medical issues. And the guy next to me was the steward. His name was Roy McClenny. He was on 1297. And he had this big, thick 3-ring binder he would always go to before he'd argue with management. And I asked him what it was. He said, that's a J-cam. And I said, well, what is that? And he told me, because this is all the rules management has to follow. So I said, well, can I borrow that? And I was still on probation at the time. And anyway, I took it home, I read it, and then I started to tell him all the stuff he wasn't doing, that he should have been doing, grievances he should have been filing. And he said, well, if you know so much, you could be steward. And I said, not until after I get off probation. So anyway, on my 91st day, I became a steward in 12 Zone. And shortly after that, I guess probably maybe a month after that, David Lambden, who was president, he assigned me to all the associate offices, all the AOs. So I was doing grievances there.
How did you represent Branch 419?
Lou Dryas became the NBA for Region 8. He had already seen some of my work, some of my formal A's I had sent to Step B. And anyway, he asked me to come down there and work for him. So I would go down there 1 week out of every month and work for Lou. And at that time, he only had one RAA. It was Pete Moss. And he had people down there like me, Steve Lassen, Danny Davis.
Where was the branch office?
Yeah, they did. When I first got involved as a steward back in 2000, we had, our office was on the 3rd floor of a building on Clinton Highway. The building was torn down. When Napa Auto Parts, that's where the building was. And the bottom floor was a store that sold fish. It was called Sally's Fancy Fins. Well, on the third floor, there was a barber shop up there, and that's where the NALC office was. But it was it's a pardon my English, it was a shithole. And the floors were like this. Well, I mean, the building was condemned, and so it got torn down. So they moved the union office to Powell, which was right off of Emory Road, up on the hill, and it was in a really, I thought it to be an inconvenient location for stewards. You know, we had stewards coming from Harriman and Oak Ridge and stuff. They could drive all the way to Powell. So I thought, hey, when I became president, let's put the union office in a place that's halfway between, you know, Newport and Harriman. So this is how we found this location right here. But this was not the first office we had here. Our office was in this same strip mall, but it was right around the corner. And when they did a major facelift and overhauled this place, they asked us, do we want to stay? And I was like, well, heck yeah. You know, they promised not to up the rent, and the rent was really reasonable for this location. So that's how we ended up in this office right here. But, and it is a much better location than what we had before.
What did you change once you became president?
And, you know, one of the first things Lou said, why don't you do mail-in ballots? Because people who weren't able to get out and come to the branch meeting or you know, at the stations, they didn't get to vote. So their voices were not heard. So that was one of the big things we did for delegates to conventions and our, you know, our elections for the branch officers and stuff like that. We went to a mail-in ballot system, and so I think it gave a lot more people an opportunity to vote. But you know, one thing I've discovered, and this is another thing, some people who had been here before my time, like Ralph Davis, who had been the branch secretary, he goes, look, man, he goes, here's, as far as people coming to branch meetings, he said, if you're winning all these grievances and management's behaving themselves, you don't have a lot of participation at the branch meetings. He goes, and that's a good thing. He goes, because when stuff is going bad, you're going to have more people come in. And sure enough, when we got some really bad managers in places like Oak Ridge, Maryville, and even Knoxville, you'd see the huge participation in the branch meetings. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to be a steward. But when stuff is going good and we're winning and management is backing off, not as many people come to them. Yeah, and you know, I had a couple postal managers that you know, would give me their honest opinion, and you know, one guy was the guy, and I don't want to name any names, but he was in charge of route inspections for the whole Tennessee district. And he told me, he said, you know, he goes, the biggest difference since you took over is you run it like a business. He goes, there's no bias, I don't like this person, you represent everybody the same. It's not a good old boys club anymore. And he goes, the way you do grievances, he goes, it's a business. He goes, you're very thorough. And the Step B team even told me, you know, several of them. Fred Qualls, when Tom Rollins was the first guy that was the union member of Step B. And this is when the Step B team was a pilot program. So if you looked in the JCAM, when I took over, this whole thing going from Step 1, Step 2, Step 3 was being shifted to Step A, to formal Step A, to the Step B team. So, and the Step B teams were still, and Tennessee was one of the pilot programs for Step B. So the first guy from the union to do Step B was Tom Rollins. Tom Rollins had it for several years, and then a guy named Fred Qualls, he was out of Branch 4, Nashville as well. He ended up taking it over. And after Fred Qualls retired, Paul Glavin took over. But I had a great rapport with all these guys, and so, you know, we would go to regional training together and everything, and they told me our branch had progressed a lot. And then, of course, Pete Moss, and then Steve Lassen after him. So, yeah, I believe our branch had progressed. Tom Rollins, who was the union guy, the NALC guy for Step B, he had a class on how to put a case file together. And he said that you put a file together as if it's going to arbitration. That's what you do. You include this, you include this, you include this, you witness statements, blah, blah, blah. Well, sure, I'm going through these old files. They didn't have any of that stuff in there. I said, you know what? If I become president, we're going to have a thorough case file. And so, as you know, because I trained you when you first transferred in here from Texas, we put a case file together. And look, a lot of stewards didn't like it when they'd hand me a file and I'm like, where's this, where's this, where's this? I did it to you. And I know you didn't like it at the time, but I think you understood why we were putting that kind of case together. And so, yeah, that was a huge change. Did management like it? Absolutely not. Because they had to give us more time on the clock to prepare a grievance. And even the stewards at informal Step A at the stations, they had to give them more time on the clock. And they didn't like that. Because for them, time is money. But for us, if one of our members is harmed or a group of members is harmed, it's important to us to put a good case together so we can sustain that grievance at either Step B or at arbitration. So yeah, I definitely changed that. And like I said, nobody liked it, but they liked it when we started sustaining all these grievances and all these arbitrations. Oh, all of a sudden, yeah, we love it now. So that was a big